Hello, my friend. Tonight, we're setting out on a journey, one that quietly takes us back in time to a world that is often misunderstood. A world before TikTok, before air conditioning, and long before anyone talked about work-life balance. We're going to look closely at what everyday life was actually like for women in Native American tribes. A life so different from your comfortable bed and streaming subscriptions that, realistically, you might struggle to last even a week. So before you settle in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, only if you truly enjoy this content. And feel free to share in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, lower the lights and let's move calmly into tonight's journey together. Imagine waking up with the sunrise, not to an alarm clock, but to birdsong and the gradual glow of light filtering through a teepee or longhouse. There's no snooze button, no refreshing your social feed. Each day, without exception, begins with an immediate awareness of the land and the needs of your community. For women in many Native American tribes, this wasn't a romantic notion. It was the foundation of daily life. The common image of Native American women, often shown as quiet, submissive figures in films and textbooks, doesn't hold up under scrutiny. In reality, their lives were complex, purposeful, and deeply influential, differing widely across the hundreds of distinct nations and regions of pre-colonial North America. You wouldn't be defined by a single role. You'd manage many. Take modern multitasking, multiply it many times over, remove all modern conveniences, and add the constant pressure of survival. From the rich agricultural regions of the East to the open plains shaped by roaming buffalo herds, women formed the backbone of their societies. Scholars still debate how uniform their influence was across all tribes, but there's no question that their contributions were essential. Consider the Haudenosaunee, also known as the Iroquois Confederacy, in what is now upstate New York. In this society, matrilineal descent wasn't just important, it was central. Identity, clan membership, and social position were all traced through the mother's line. This structure went far beyond family names. Clan mothers held significant authority. They owned the longhouses, managed food distribution, and even had the power to appoint or remove chiefs. Picture a grandmother with the authority to dismiss a mayor. That alone challenges the idea of Native American women as passive figures and certainly reframes traditional notions of leadership. Beyond formal authority, women's daily economic contributions were immense. In agricultural tribes, women were the primary farmers. They understood lunar cycles, soil conditions, and the precise timing needed to plant corn, beans, and squash, the three sisters that sustained many communities. From planting to harvest, they cared for these crops, often using advanced methods like companion planting long before such practices were formally studied. This was a long way from selecting groceries online. Farming was only part of the picture. Women were also skilled foragers, with detailed knowledge of edible plants, roots, and berries in their region. They possessed extensive understanding of medicinal plants, with remedies passed down through generations. Knowing which leaf could reduce fever or which bark could help heal a wound was not optional. It was essential. This environmental knowledge wasn't a pastime. It directly affected survival. In Plains tribes, where life revolved around the buffalo, women's roles were no less critical, just adapted to different conditions. While men hunted, women processed the entire animal. Skinning and tanning hides, preserving meat, and crafting clothing and tools from bone, sinew, and fur were all part of their responsibilities. Nothing was wasted. Every part of the animal served a purpose. A single hide could become a teepee covering, footwear, or winter clothing. These were fully developed systems of sustainability, built out of necessity. While other societies were still debating social hierarchies or basic infrastructure, Native American women were maintaining efficient, self-sustaining ways of life. They were not defined solely as wives or mothers. They were farmers, builders, healers, artists, and often influential political actors. And this only begins to explain the reality of their lives. As the sun rose higher, the work didn't slow, it simply changed. Mornings might be spent in the fields, hands working steadily in the soil. By midday, attention would shift to other equally important tasks. Unlike modern life, where work and personal life are often separated, every activity here was connected to the survival and health of the community. Individual efforts served collective well-being. You were part of a carefully balanced natural and social system. Food preparation alone extended far beyond harvesting. Berries were dried for winter. Corn was ground into meal using heavy stone tools, a physically demanding task that could take hours. Every motion mattered, because each grain helped sustain families through long, cold months. This wasn't a decorative tradition, it was necessity in its purest form. Historians still discuss whether the energy required for such labor exceeded the calories consumed, highlighting just how demanding daily life could be. Then there was water. With no plumbing or filtration systems, you'd regularly carry heavy containers from rivers or streams back to camp. Depending on the season, this might mean long walks or even breaking ice in winter. It's a routine that puts modern conveniences into sharp perspective. Firewood was another constant concern. Fires were needed for cooking, warmth, and light, and keeping them going required daily effort. Gathering branches, cutting smaller trees, and hauling fuel back to camp was never-ending. Every warm meal and every protected night depended on it. There were no shortcuts, no deliveries, only continuous work closely tied to the natural world. Beyond these survival needs, women were also the primary creators of the tools and goods used in everyday life, shaping the material culture of their communities through skill, experience, and necessity. Think about every basket, every clay vessel, every woven mat around you. None of these were mass-produced. They were crafted by hand, often by you, through patience, precision, and experience. From collecting raw materials, clay from riverbanks, reeds from wetlands, plant fibers from the land, to the careful steps of shaping, drying, firing, or weaving, each object reflected deep knowledge and sustained effort. Creating a single usable pot could take days or even weeks, and once finished, it would be valued and used until it finally wore out. In many Pueblo communities, pottery was both an artistic expression and a daily necessity, practiced largely by women. Techniques were passed down through generations, resulting in vessels that were visually striking and strong enough for cooking and storage. Designs frequently carried spiritual significance, turning each piece into a story. You weren't simply making a bowl, you were shaping history and belief into a functional form. If your tribe depended on animal hides for clothing and shelter, tanning would be another essential skill. This was not a simple errand to acquire leather. It required long hours of scraping, soaking, stretching, and often smoking hides until they became soft and water-resistant. The process was physically demanding and far from pleasant, but the outcome mattered: warm clothing and durable coverings for teepees or lodges. Among Plains tribes, especially those reliant on buffalo, this work was critical. Your family's survival through harsh winds and freezing winters depended directly on your ability to turn raw hides into protection. Compared to this, buying a winter coat today seems almost effortless. Even moments of rest rarely meant inactivity. Storytelling often took place alongside beadwork, quillwork, or weaving, where simple materials became objects of beauty and cultural value. These items were not created solely for decoration. They conveyed tribal history, spiritual ideas, and social identity. So while your mind might find rest, your hands continued contributing to the community's cultural and material strength. This constant and varied labor built a strong sense of purpose and endurance. You were not watching life happen around you. You were fully engaged in shaping it, as a maker, a provider, and a contributor. Every sore muscle and blistered hand reflected your importance. Daily work was not only about survival, it was about collective success, creating a complex culture rooted in skill, creativity, and a deep bond with the land and with one another. As the sun moved closer to its highest point, attention naturally shifted to the most basic human need: food. This world had no supermarkets or corner shops. Every bite, every berry, root, or piece of meat required the effort, knowledge, and often patience. Your relationship with nature was direct and physical. Farm to table meant your own hands in the soil and often long journeys to gather resources. You couldn't simply crave a certain meal. If you wanted fish and rice, you would need to catch the fish, grow or gather the grain, and create the seasonings yourself. In many Native American societies, agriculture was primarily the responsibility of women. While men might help clear land, the careful, season-long tasks of planting, tending, and harvesting were yours. You understood the growth cycles of corn, beans, and squash, knowing exactly when to plant and when to harvest. Planting a single corn seed required care, while maintaining the fields involved demanding labor, such as building up soil to protect crops from wind and pests. This was far more than simple gardening. It was the organized management of the tribe's main food supply, often providing most of the calories needed throughout the year. This agricultural expertise was passed from mother to daughter, forming a living system of sustainable farming knowledge. If your tribe was not primarily agricultural, perhaps nomadic or semi-nomadic, like those in the Great Basin or parts of the Southwest, your skills would focus on foraging instead. This was not a casual activity. It was systematic and based on generations of experience. You knew which plants were safe to eat, which were dangerous, and which had medicinal uses. You gathered wild rice, nuts, berries, roots, and seeds, then processed them into flour, oils, or dried foods. Knowing where to find camas roots or how to properly leach acorns to remove bitterness turned otherwise inedible resources into reliable nourishment. This work wasn't just about collecting food, it was about making it safe and usable. Historians still debate how much of tribal diets came from foraging versus hunting, underscoring how often women's gathering efforts have been undervalued. Food preservation demanded equal innovation. Without refrigeration, you relied on drying, smoking, and storing supplies carefully. Meat, fruits, and vegetables were prepared to last through times of scarcity. Consider pemmican, a staple of Plains tribes, dried meat ground with rendered fat and often mixed with berries. This calorie-rich food could remain edible for years and was frequently prepared by women. It functioned much like a modern energy bar, but required far more labor and raw materials. Preparing and storing food wasn't only about preventing hunger. It ensured survival through long winters and unexpected shortages. Alongside this was a strong understanding of resource management. You gathered with care, avoiding overuse of any single area so resources could renew themselves. This respect for ecological balance was central to Native American life and was often guided by women who viewed the land as a living provider rather than something to exploit, a concept many modern societies are still working to understand. Examples varied by region. In the Pacific Northwest, men might fish for salmon, but women played a crucial role in cleaning, drying, and smoking large quantities for storage, securing a steady protein supply year-round. In the Southwest, women carefully maintained cornfields while also harvesting wild agave, roasting it in pits for days to produce a sweet, fibrous food. Each environment required specific knowledge, and across regions, women consistently held the expertise needed to unlock the land's food resources. So while men might hunt and bring back game, women often transformed those resources into food, clothing, tools, and shelter. Their contribution to the economy was not secondary. It was essential. Without women's plant knowledge, farming skills, preservation methods, and persistent daily labor, many tribes could not have endured. You were, in a very real sense, the guardians of nourishment, ensuring the strength and well-being of the entire community. As the sun began to lower, stretching long shadows across the land, your responsibilities did not end. Beyond food, building and maintaining the homes you lived in was another vital task, often led by you. This work was about more than basic shelter. It required designing strong, flexible structures that could endure weather and provide comfort, an impressive engineering achievement without modern tools or materials. There was no one else to call for help. You were the planner, the builder, and the workforce, shaping a home that supported daily life and long-term survival. Consider the wide range of dwellings found across native North America. From the teepee of the plains to the longhouse of the Northeast, the wigwam of the woodlands, and the adobe pueblo of the Southwest, women played a central role in building and maintaining these homes. This was never a one-time task. These structures needed ongoing care, frequent repairs, and often had to be taken down and rebuilt as communities moved with the seasons or followed vital resources. Imagine yourself among a plains tribe. The teepee, iconic and seemingly simple, was in fact a highly effective form of portable architecture, and women were its primary builders and owners. After a successful buffalo hunt, men returned with the hides, but it was your responsibility to tan them, sew them together with sinew, and raise the large conical structure. Once stitched, the hides were extremely heavy, requiring strength and coordination to lift onto the pole frame. Picture struggling with several cured buffalo hides in strong winds, trying to secure them correctly. This was far more complex than assembling flat-pack furniture. The work did not end with construction. Teepees demanded constant attention. You adjusted the smoke flaps to control airflow during cooking, tightened ropes as hides expanded or shrank with changing humidity, and made regular repairs. When the tribe moved, as plains tribes often did to follow the buffalo, it was mainly women who took down the teepee, loaded it onto travois pulled by dogs or horses, and rebuilt it at the next campsite. This process happened often, sometimes every few days or weeks, making you highly skilled in rapid, repeatable construction. While historians continue to discuss the exact division of labor in all aspects of teepee use and transport, the essential role of women is widely recognized. Now turn your attention to the Northeast, home of the Haudenosaunee. Their longhouses were large communal dwellings made of wood and bark, sometimes extending over 100 feet and housing several families from the same clan. Men generally cut the large trees used for the main framework, but women gathered sheets of bark, often elm or cedar, and carefully secured them to form the walls and roof. This work required climbing, cutting, lifting, and fastening heavy, awkward materials using skill and creativity. The longhouse was not just a shelter, it was the center of the matrilineal clan. Owned and managed by clan mothers, it gave women authority over residency and the distribution of shared resources. Decisions about living arrangements rested firmly in their hands. In the Southwest, where adobe pueblos were built from sun-dried earth bricks, women again played a key role. While men often mixed the adobe and laid the foundations, women were commonly responsible for plastering the walls inside and out using clay, water, and sometimes straw. This plastering was not decorative alone. It protected the bricks from erosion and helped control indoor temperatures. Women also maintained the flat roofs, which often served as workspaces or living areas. This was not simple upkeep, it was the ongoing care of multi-story structures essential to daily life. Beyond the buildings themselves, women managed the interior environment. They wove mats for sleeping and sitting, crafted storage containers from natural materials, and organized living spaces for efficiency and comfort. Many tools, blankets, and cooking items were made or maintained by your hands. The domestic sphere was far from insignificant. It was a center of constant production and careful planning that supported the health and stability of the entire household. Whether you were raising a teepee beneath the open prairie sky, fastening bark to a longhouse frame, or carefully plastering an adobe wall, your labor shaped the physical world of your community. Your skills provided warmth, shelter, and security every day. Compared to this, modern homeownership can seem remarkably simple. As evening settled and the camp grew quieter, your work was far from finished. Another essential responsibility awaited: clothing and personal comfort. Forget fast fashion. Every thread, bead, and piece of leather you wore represented hours, days, or even weeks of focused labor. Clothing was not about trends. It protected against harsh weather, expressed identity, and honored the materials provided by the natural world. Consider the effort required to create a single outfit. For a plains woman, transforming raw hide into clothing was a long process. It began with tanning, turning buffalo, deer, or elk skins into soft, usable leather. This was demanding work and a full sensory experience. The smell of brains or wood used in curing, the feel of the hide gradually softening through scraping and stretching. It required patience and persistence far beyond modern shopping habits. Once the leather was ready, the detailed work began. You cut and stitched it using bone tools and sinew thread, often adding patterns that carried cultural meaning. Each stitch mattered. It reflected family traditions or tribal identity. Decoration followed. Beadwork, quillwork, and shell ornaments were not simply decorative. They communicated status, belonging, and spiritual values. Before glass beads became common through trade, porcupine quills were widely used. Gathering them was only the first step. Each quill had to be softened, dyed, flattened, and then carefully stitched into place. Every piece required individual attention, folded and sewn with precision to form geometric designs or symbolic scenes. This slow, focused process demanded skill and concentration. Historians still discuss the origins of many of these patterns, underscoring the depth and continuity of the tradition. Even basic items like blankets or wraps took considerable effort. If your community practiced weaving, you gathered plant fibers, processed them into thread, and wove textiles on looms. This might be a backstrap loom, tensioned by your own body, or a larger upright loom producing strong, lasting fabrics for warmth, carrying goods, or ceremonial use. Woven patterns often identified your tribe or clan and reflected both skill and heritage. Your responsibilities extended beyond yourself. You clothed your entire family from infancy through old age. Over a lifetime, you might make dozens of pairs of moccasins, each carefully fitted and durable enough for constant travel across varied terrain. Every garment, bag, or pouch you created served a purpose and carried meaning. Worn items were repaired, reused, or respectfully returned to the earth rather than discarded. This ongoing creation of clothing and adornment was not merely routine labor. It was a core part of a woman's identity and a vital contribution to her community's survival and continuity. Your mastery of these skills earned respect, and your work reflected the strength and beauty of your culture. It served as a clear expression of care, creativity, and commitment. So, the next time you put on a favorite comfortable outfit, pause for a moment and imagine a world where every thread and every seam carried a story shaped by hands, patience, and pure necessity. As the sun slowly dropped toward the horizon, coloring the sky in shades of orange and violet, another central part of a woman's life came into focus: motherhood. This was far more than a biological role. It was a profound responsibility, raising the next generation to preserve the tribe's continuity, resilience, and cultural identity. You were not simply a parent. You were an educator, a cultural mentor, and a guardian, actively shaping the future of your community. Consider the intense physical demands of childbirth in a world without modern medical care. Although many tribes relied on experienced midwives and deep knowledge of herbal treatments, the process always carried serious risks. Still, life moved forward, and the arrival of a child was a moment of deep happiness and shared importance for the entire community. From the instant a newborn entered the world, your role as a mother became one of constant care and awareness. Early childhood required close physical connection. Many Native American cultures practiced co-sleeping and feeding on demand, strengthening the bond between mother and child. Infants were often carried in cradle boards, carefully designed to keep the baby safe and comfortable while allowing you to continue daily work such as gathering food, preparing meals, or crafting essential items. This was not merely practical. It created an ongoing closeness that introduced the child to the sounds, movements, and rhythms of tribal life from the very beginning. Compared to modern nurseries and electronic monitors, this approach feels worlds apart. As children grew older, your responsibilities expanded beyond physical care into focused education. Nearly every task became an opportunity to teach. While collecting berries, you would show your child which plants were safe and which were dangerous, passing on essential knowledge of the environment. While preparing hides, you demonstrated exact techniques and tools, building skills they would rely on as adults. Learning was not abstract or theoretical. It was direct, hands-on, and closely tied to survival and cultural preservation. Girls especially spent time alongside their mothers and female relatives, learning farming, cooking, crafting, and healing practices. Knowledge was passed on through observation, participation, and steady guidance, carrying forward generations of experience. There were no formal classrooms. The natural world itself was the classroom, and you were the main teacher. This continuous form of apprenticeship ensured that skills and traditions moved smoothly from one generation to the next. While scholars debate the specific teaching methods used by different tribes, the success of this immersive system is clear. Beyond practical instruction, you were also responsible for passing down values, ethics, and spiritual beliefs. Through stories, songs, and everyday behavior, you taught respect for elders, care for the natural world, the importance of community, and an understanding of one's place in the spiritual order. These lessons were not simple entertainment. They served as moral guides, shaping character and defining what it meant to live with honor. Puberty ceremonies for girls, which marked the transition into womanhood, were especially important in many tribes. Among the Apache, for instance, this ceremony symbolized acceptance of adult responsibilities and called for blessings of health, longevity, and fertility. Elder women often led these events, highlighting the importance of shared wisdom and intergenerational support. Motherhood, therefore, held a position of deep respect within Native American societies. Your ability to nurture, teach, and guide children directly influenced the tribe's long-term strength and stability. This role extended beyond individual households and affected the survival and success of the entire community. In this sense, you were shaping human potential itself, laying the groundwork of society through the lives you raised. Compared to this responsibility, every other task seemed relatively small. As evening settled in and a cool breeze moved through the trees outside your home, you might reflect on a deeper truth about your society. Much of its identity flowed through women. This was not a system where authority rested solely with men. In many tribes, matrilineal structures formed the foundation of power, heritage, and influence. Family lineage through the mother determined clan membership, social position, and often political influence. This approach challenged many familiar historical norms. In these societies, descent and inheritance followed the female line. This was common among groups such as the Haudenosaunee, Cherokee, Creek, Hopi, and many Pueblo peoples. Property, homes, and important ceremonial items were often controlled by women or by female family lines. When a man married, he typically moved into his wife's household. The children belonged to her clan, not his. This structure reinforced women's independence and status. You did not lose your identity through marriage. Instead, you remained firmly connected to your own family, supported by your female relatives. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy offers a strong example of a structured and influential matrilineal society. Clan mothers, respected elder women, held significant political authority. They selected the male chiefs who represented the clans and could remove them if they failed to serve the people responsibly. This gave women real control over leadership and governance. You were not merely participating in politics, you played a decisive role in shaping it. This matrilineal influence extended into daily life as well. In longhouses, elder women managed shared resources, oversaw food supplies, and maintained harmony among families. Your opinions carried weight because your lineage formed the core of the household. While historians continue to debate whether these systems should be labeled matriarchal, the respect and influence granted to women are undeniable. Even in tribes without strict matrilineal structures, women often held strong informal power. As providers, teachers, and spiritual figures, their perspectives were valued in councils and major decisions. In many Plains tribes, for example, women owned the teepees and household goods, giving them economic control uncommon elsewhere at the time. Their collective voices influenced migration decisions, negotiations, and even choices related to conflict or peace. This focus on female lineage created a stable support system that strengthened the entire community. You would grow up surrounded by your mother, grandmothers, aunts, and sisters, a strong circle of experienced women who offered guidance, shared daily work, and gave consistent support. This system of communal caregiving and shared labor reduced the pressure on individual mothers and built a strong sense of unity and identity. It wasn't simply the idea that a village raises a child, it was the belief that a powerful female lineage sustained the strength of the tribe. So while modern views of ancient societies often focus on male-centered power, the reality for many Native American women was notably different. You were born into a heritage of authority, responsibility, and respect, where your bloodline served as the thread holding the community together. This quiet form of strength is often overlooked in historical accounts, yet it played a critical role in shaping the lives and futures of millions. As night settled in, perhaps lit only by the glow of a fire, your world would also include a deep spiritual dimension beyond what could be seen or touched. For Native American women, spirituality was not limited to specific days or occasions. It was embedded in everyday life, linking them to the land, their ancestors, and unseen forces that influenced their world. You were not merely present during ceremonies. You were often a guardian of sacred traditions, a channel between worlds, and an essential figure in maintaining balance. In many, though not all, Native American cultures, women held meaningful spiritual responsibilities, serving as healers, ceremonial leaders, visionaries, and storytellers. Their close relationship with cycles of life, birth, and creation often placed them in positions of spiritual authority. This spirituality was not about rigid belief systems. It centered on relationships, a shared and personal connection to the spiritual realm that shaped daily existence. Women frequently acted as keepers of sacred knowledge and rituals. Many traditions relied on specific songs, dances, ceremonies, and stories passed down orally through generations. Women were often the main protectors of this knowledge, ensuring ancestral wisdom was preserved and accurately taught to the young. Memorizing long histories, complex songs, and detailed ceremonial practices carried serious responsibility, as the spiritual health of the community depended on it. The pressure involved far exceeded ordinary memory tasks, reflecting the importance of the role. In some tribes, women played central roles in major ceremonies. Among the Hopi, for example, women were essential to agricultural rituals, especially those centered on corn, which was regarded as a sacred mother. Their responsibilities included caring for the corn both physically and spiritually, supporting its growth through prayer, song, and ritual. These actions were not viewed as symbolic alone. They were understood as real interactions with the forces that sustained life. While historians continue to discuss the precise meanings of these gender-based spiritual roles, the close link between female identity, agriculture, and life-giving power is widely recognized. Women also served as spiritual advisors, interpreters of dreams, and visionaries. Their insight into the spiritual world was respected, and their guidance was often sought during periods of uncertainty or crisis. They might interpret dreams that influenced important decisions or undertake vision quests to gain direction and spiritual strength for the community. These practices often involved solitude in nature, fasting, and prayer in search of guidance. Such levels of reflection and spiritual discipline are uncommon in today's fast-paced world. The sacred nature of life, especially new life, placed women at the center of birth and naming ceremonies. As life-givers, mothers and grandmothers often held special spiritual authority during these transitions. Their knowledge helped protect and spiritually welcome new members into the tribe, ensuring harmony between the human and spirit worlds. This responsibility directly connected them to the deeper mysteries of creation. Even the items women made carried spiritual meaning. The patterns woven into baskets, designs painted on pottery, and beadwork on ceremonial clothing were more than decoration. They often represented sacred symbols, spiritual beings, or maps of the universe, giving everyday objects deeper significance. Crafting was not merely a practical task, it was a way of embedding spiritual meaning into the physical world. Each creation functioned like a quiet prayer, a tangible link to the sacred. While men participated in their own spiritual practices, often related to hunting or warfare, the spiritual life of many Native American tribes was strongly shaped by female presence and leadership. Women's roles were not simply supportive, they were often foundational. They connected the physical and spiritual worlds, sustained communal harmony, and helped maintain balance with the universe. This legacy of spiritual responsibility formed a steady foundation beneath tribal life. As the calm of night continued, another essential role of women became clear, that of healer. In societies without hospitals, pharmacies, or modern medical knowledge, women were frequently the primary health providers. They possessed extensive knowledge of the natural world and its healing properties. You were not only a caregiver but a central figure in the practice of medicine, often serving as the first, and sometimes only, source of treatment for your community. Treating illness meant relying on plants and inherited knowledge to address fevers, snake bites, broken bones, and persistent coughs. Native American women met these challenges with skill and dedication. Their understanding of herbal medicine was extensive, built on generations of careful observation and practical experience. They knew which roots, leaves, and barks to use and how each addressed specific conditions. This knowledge reflected a comprehensive approach to health that considered physical, emotional, and spiritual factors together. Training as a healer began early, often through close observation of elder women. You would learn to identify hundreds of plants, understand their seasons and environments, and know how to prepare them properly, whether as poultices, teas, or medicinal smoke. This demanded strong attention to detail, a reliable memory, and respect for nature's power. In many ways, it combined the skills of a botanist, chemist, and pharmacist, achieved without formal laboratories. For example, many tribes used willow bark to ease pain long before modern medicine identified salicylic acid, the basis of aspirin. Other plants were used to stop bleeding or clean wounds. These practices were not accidental discoveries but the result of long-term experimentation and shared knowledge. While historians may debate the effectiveness of certain remedies by modern standards, their positive influence on community health is well established. In addition to herbal treatments, women used other healing methods such as massage, cupping, and early surgical techniques when needed. They practiced forms of hygiene using natural materials to reduce infection and understood the connection between physical illness and emotional or spiritual imbalance. Healing often included prayer, song, or storytelling alongside medicine, addressing the whole person rather than isolated symptoms. Midwifery was another role almost entirely held by women, carrying deep responsibility and trust. This position placed them at the heart of life's most critical moments, reinforcing their importance as healers and protectors within the community. They supported pregnant women throughout childbirth, providing reassurance, emotional steadiness, and hands-on help. They understood which herbs could support labor, how to respond to complications, and how to properly care for both mother and child during the critical postpartum phase. This close knowledge of women's bodies and the process of birth made them essential members of every community. Their steady presence and inherited knowledge offered comfort and protection during one of life's most fragile experiences. Whether you were soothing a sick child, setting a fractured bone, or helping with a challenging delivery, your skills and experience formed the first line of medical care. Your commitment to healing was a meaningful act of service, grounded in deep respect for nature and a firm dedication to the health of your people. This tradition of care and understanding continues to echo into the present. As night settled in and the smell of wood smoke lingered, your hands, worn from a full day of practical work, often turned toward another vital sphere, art and craft. This was not simple pastime. It was a powerful expression of culture, identity, and belief, shaping raw resources into objects that carried beauty, purpose, and meaning. You were not only a craftswoman. You were a creator, a visual narrator, and a guardian of cultural memory. Consider the wide range of materials you worked with: clay gathered from riverbanks, fibers harvested from wetlands, hides from the hunt, porcupine quills, and even small shells or stone fragments. Each material required specific techniques and a respectful understanding of its nature. There was no concept of mass production. Every item was made by hand, infused with care, skill, and often spiritual intent. Take pottery as an example. In many tribes, especially in the Southwest among the Pueblo peoples, pottery was largely women's work. You learned how to identify and prepare suitable clay, how to coil it carefully into forms ranging from storage vessels to cooking pots and ceremonial pieces, and how to smooth and polish each surface. Firing followed, often done in open pits, a demanding process that required careful control of heat. Finally came decoration, using pigments drawn from plants and minerals to paint geometric designs, animals, or sacred symbols. Each vessel was more than a tool. It served as a visual record, reflecting beliefs, stories, or appreciation for the natural world. Compared to this, a modern ceramic mug feels remarkably plain. Basket weaving offers another example, Practiced by women across nearly all Native American cultures, those styles and materials varied widely. From the tightly coiled, watertight baskets of California tribes to the sturdy burden baskets of plateau peoples, each piece balanced function with design. You spent long hours collecting and preparing materials, willow, cedar, spruce root, bear grass, before carefully weaving them into detailed forms. Many patterns were specific to a tribe or family, acting as recognizable visual markers. Scholars continue to debate the precise meanings behind certain designs, underscoring the complexity of these traditions. Quillwork and beadwork were equally striking. Porcupine quills were softened, dyed with plant-based colors, flattened, and stitched onto hides or bark to create vivid designs. Later, European trade introduced glass beads, which became another expressive medium. You devoted countless hours to sewing tiny beads onto clothing, bags, and ceremonial objects, forming elaborate patterns that could signal status, lineage, or spiritual meaning. These creations were not merely decorative. They functioned as a visual language, communicating identity and values. Even everyday household items reflected this artistic mindset. A carefully carved wooden spoon, a decorated cradleboard, or a thoughtfully made doll all demonstrated the same attention to form and meaning. Art was not confined to special spaces. It was woven into daily life, a constant process that enriched the ordinary. While your hands were strong from farming and construction, they were also precise and skilled, capable of shaping nature into refined objects. Through these crafts, you met practical needs while preserving history, expressing belief, and affirming cultural identity. This creative heritage remains deeply impressive. With morning light spreading across the sky, your personal life, especially relationships and family, looked very different from the romantic ideals often portrayed today. In many Native American societies, marriage was rarely centered on individual romance. Instead, it served practical and communal purposes, strengthening alliances and ensuring continuity. Choosing a partner meant reinforcing the broader social structure. Compatibility was judged less by personal charm and more by ability, responsibility, and contribution to the group. Marriages were often arranged by families or clan leaders with the community's interests in mind. This might involve linking influential families, supporting trade relationships, or forming a stable partnership that could sustain a household and raise children effectively. While this approach may lack fairy tale elements, it prioritized shared survival and long-term stability. Historians continue to discuss how much personal choice women had in these arrangements, but the collective focus is clear. Marriage customs differed widely. In some groups, a man presented gifts to show respect and capability. In matrilineal societies such as the Haudenosaunee, the woman's family or clan mother held authority, and her consent was essential. In certain cultures, trial marriages existed, allowing couples to live together temporarily before formal recognition. This practical method allowed compatibility to be tested in a way uncommon in many historical societies. Gift exchange was common, but it was not equivalent to purchasing a bride. Instead, it acknowledged the worth of both individuals and the bond being formed. Gifts often moved in both directions, symbolizing mutual respect and shared responsibility. Marriage established new kinship ties rather than ownership. After marriage, roles were distinct yet connected. You typically managed domestic responsibilities, agriculture, gathering, and craftwork, while your husband focused on hunting, warfare, and specific ceremonial duties. These divisions did not imply hierarchy. Each role was necessary, and neither was considered inherently superior. Both men and women were seen as equally vital to the household and the tribe. They were partners in survival, each contributing essential skills. It was like a carefully choreographed dance where every step mattered. Polygamy, especially polygyny, one man with multiple wives, was practiced in some tribes, often among chiefs or wealthy individuals. This was not necessarily a sign of female subjugation. Sometimes, it was a practical solution in labor-intensive societies, where more hands increased productivity. In many cases, wives were sisters, a practice called sororal polygyny, thought to promote harmony and cooperation in the household. Imagine sharing your kitchen with your sister, times 2 or 3. Depending on personalities, it could be wonderfully cooperative or chaotic. Overall, marriage was a cornerstone of tribal life, a way to continue family lines, build social networks, and maintain community stability. A woman's role was profoundly important, not just as a wife or mother, but as a key link in kinship and a contributor to collective prosperity. Marriage united not just individuals, but families, clans, or even tribes, tied together by mutual benefit and shared destiny. As the early morning light streamed into the dwelling, one might notice another intriguing aspect of Native American marital life: the relative ease and acceptance of divorce and personal autonomy. Unlike many societies of the time, where marriage could be an unbreakable or oppressive bond, women in numerous tribes had surprising freedom to end a union. You weren't trapped, you often had the power to walk away. Picture a world where leaving a marriage wasn't scandalous or legally complex, but a recognized part of life. While marriage was important for social stability, the well-being and harmony of individuals were also valued. If a union was incompatible, unproductive, or unhappy, separation was often simple and accepted. This contrasts sharply with contemporary European societies, where divorce was rare, difficult, or required legal and religious intervention. In many tribes, particularly matrilineal ones like the Nossorni, divorce was especially accessible to women. Since the home belonged to the woman and her clan, a man who displeased his wife might find his belongings placed outside the longhouse door, a clear, silent message: "You're out." No arguments, no court dates, just a decisive, practical separation. Reasons for divorce varied: incompatibility, neglect, laziness, or simply a desire for a different partner. The primary concern was whether the couple contributed to the community and maintained household harmony. Separation was seen as a practical solution rather than a moral failing. Children typically remained with their mother and her clan, strengthening the matrilineal line and providing continuity and care within a stable support system. Among some tribes, temporary separations were also common. Spouses might live apart to reflect or cool tensions. This fluid approach allowed relationships to adapt, almost like a timeout for adults but with real consequences for living arrangements. While men could also initiate divorce, it was often easier for women in societies where property and lineage followed the female line. This granted women remarkable autonomy, allowing them to leave abusive or unfulfilling relationships and seek better circumstances for themselves and their children. Historians debate the social pressures influencing these decisions, but the framework for female agency was evident. Acceptance of divorce highlighted the importance of individual happiness and communal harmony. A miserable couple could disrupt the entire household, affecting children and the wider clan. By allowing separation, tribes prioritized the well-being of members and the smooth functioning of social units. For Native American women, marriage emphasized practical partnership and the freedom to pursue a fulfilling life, even if that meant ending a union that no longer served its purpose. It's a reminder that traditional doesn't always mean rigid, and respect for personal autonomy can appear in unexpected ways. As campfire embers glowed and shadows danced on gathered faces, one might notice the quiet reverence shown to elder women. Their presence was celebrated. They were valued for wisdom, experience, and memory. For women in Native American tribes, reaching old age often meant gaining profound respect and influence. You weren't just aging, you were becoming a living library, a guiding star, and a respected voice. Wrinkles weren't hidden. Each line told a story of resilience, knowledge, and survival. Elder women were custodians of tradition, preserving tribal history, ceremonial knowledge, medicinal remedies, and practical skills. They remembered old stories, songs, and proper practices, serving as the collective memory of the community. Losing an elder was like losing a chapter of history, far more profound. Their wisdom was practical. They had lived through seasons of abundance and scarcity, hardship, and celebration. This experience made them invaluable advisors on agriculture, weather, intertribal relations, and personal disputes. When difficult decisions arose, elder women were often consulted. Their calm, seasoned perspective guided the community. In matrilineal societies, Clan mothers held explicit political power. They could appoint or remove chiefs, manage communal property, and influence alliances and treaties. Age and experience were seen as qualifications for leadership, prioritizing wisdom over youthful energy. Beyond formal authority, elder women played central roles in daily life. They were primary educators for children, especially girls, teaching essential skills like weaving, pottery, or hide preparation. Their guidance ensured traditional crafts and lifeways continued. They also provided childcare, enabling younger mothers to engage in communal activities. It was like having a constant, highly experienced, and deeply caring support system for raising children. Interestingly, in some tribes, elder women were also responsible for upholding moral standards and resolving family or clan disputes. Their respected status allowed them to mediate conflicts and maintain harmony, sometimes through gentle guidance, other times with firm decisions. Imagine your grandmother resolving a neighborhood quarrel with unquestioned authority. Respect for elder women was deeply embedded in the culture. Younger generations were taught to listen, learn, and care for their elders. Their needs were prioritized, and their presence provided comfort and security. It was a reciprocal relationship. Elders offered wisdom and guidance, while the community provided care and honor. As we reflect on Native American women, it's clear that aging did not diminish their influence. Instead, it marked a period of profound respect, where accumulated knowledge became a guiding light for the entire community. They were the keepers of tradition, memory, and the enduring heart of their people. Even in spheres often seen as male-dominated, such as war and diplomacy, women exerted subtle yet significant influence. While men were typically the warriors and formal negotiators, women shaped tribal conflicts, alliances, and peacemaking in indirect but crucial ways. Consider the stakes. Decisions about war or peace affected every member of the tribe, including the potential loss of husbands, sons, and brothers, disruption of daily life, and the threat of attacks or displacement. Their voices, often expressed through informal channels or through the authority of clan mothers, carried immense weight. Women weren't on the battlefield, but their homes and families were deeply affected by these conflicts and often were the ultimate beneficiaries of peace. In many societies, especially matrilineal ones, women had the final say on whether a war party would proceed or whether captives would be adopted or executed. Among the Had and Nossorni, for example, clan mothers could prevent their sons from going to war, and they often determined the fate of prisoners of war. This gave them extraordinary moral authority, serving as the conscience of the Confederacy in life and death decisions, a form of anti-war influence modern activists can only admire. Women were also vital to sustaining warriors. They prepared food, repaired clothing, and provided medical care for the injured, ensuring fighters were healthy and supplied. Without their behind-the-scenes efforts, sustained military campaigns would have been impossible. Additionally, women frequently acted as peacemakers and diplomats. They might initiate peace talks by sending messages or gifts, leveraging kinship ties across tribes, or arranging marriages to solidify alliances and prevent conflict. As mothers of the children resulting from these unions, women embodied the bonds of peace. Female captives adopted into new tribes sometimes played similar roles, connecting their birth and adopted communities, a unique form of diplomacy. While historians debate the extent of women's formal participation in treaty negotiations, their indirect influence is well documented. Even their public expressions of grief could sway male leaders toward peace. Women's emotional and spiritual authority provided a counterbalance to the aggression of male warrior societies. Their contributions to war and peace show that leadership was not limited to displays of strength. It encompassed a nuanced understanding of social dynamics, a deep commitment to community well-being, and the moral courage to guide decisions critical to survival. Their quiet strength often maintained balance and continuity in tribal life. Yet, a far greater threat loomed: captivity. For Native American women, being captured by enemy tribes, or later by European colonizers, was a constant danger. In such circumstances, their resilience and adaptability were remarkable. Captured women were not merely victims. They became survivors, often forced to rebuild their lives under unimaginable conditions. The experience of capture was traumatic: sudden raids, fire, separation from family, long forced marches, and exposure to harsh conditions. But outcomes varied depending on the capturing tribe. Unlike European enslavement, which often sought permanent dehumanization, many Native American tribes practiced captive integration. This was still difficult but offered a path to a new life. Women and children were often adopted to replace lost members or strengthen the community, given new names, and gradually assimilated into a new social and cultural environment, a process requiring immense emotional strength. Sometimes, adopted captives gained positions of respect within their new tribes, especially if they married into prominent families or demonstrated exceptional skills. Some became clan mothers, healers, or influential advisors, demonstrating extraordinary resilience and cultural integration, akin to moving to a new country overnight and rising to a leadership role. However, captivity was not always benign. Some faced harsh treatment, forced labor, or exploitation, especially if not formally adopted or if they resisted assimilation. With European colonization, the nature of captivity changed fundamentally, often becoming more brutal and dehumanizing. European and later American forces frequently captured Native women for various purposes: forced labor, sexual slavery, or as leverage in conflicts. This form of captivity was often brutal, leaving little hope for freedom or reintegration, resulting in immense suffering and high mortality. Stories of women surviving captivity, whether through adoption into other tribes or enduring European enslavement, stand as powerful testaments to human resilience. They reflect a determination to live, adapt, and assert agency even under extreme dehumanization. Yet, these narratives, often overlooked in mainstream history, highlight not just suffering but extraordinary strength and perseverance in the face of unimaginable adversity. The world as you knew it began to fracture, not because of tribal conflicts or seasonal famine, but due to an entirely foreign force arriving on your shores. Colonization was not gradual, it was a violent upheaval that profoundly reshaped the lives of Native American women, disrupting traditional roles and societal structures. You were about to face transformations beyond anything your ancestors could have imagined. Picture a sophisticated, interconnected society where women held essential roles in agriculture, governance, and spiritual life. Suddenly, you were confronted by a culture that largely treated women as property, restricted them to domestic spaces, and disregarded their traditional contributions. This clash was not a mere misunderstanding. It was a direct assault on the balance of power and gender roles within your communities. The carefully woven fabric of your culture began to unravel, thread by thread. One immediate effect was the imposition of patriarchal norms. European colonizers, coming from male-dominated societies, often ignored the authority of Native women, choosing to negotiate only with male leaders while bypassing influential clan mothers and female figures. This systematically undermined women's political power, shifting authority to men who could interact with the newcomers. It was like changing the rules of the game mid-play, with the stakes being your entire way of life. Economic roles also shifted dramatically. As trade with Europeans expanded, hunting for furs became central to tribal economies, elevating the importance of male hunters and reducing the perceived value of women's traditional roles in agriculture and gathering. Your vital work sustaining the community appeared less significant compared to a beaver pelt. This wasn't a reflection of its true value but of the Europeans' economic priorities. Historians still debate how much Native men themselves adopted these hierarchies, but European influence was undeniable. The introduction of new technologies and goods further altered traditional women's crafts. Metal pots replaced pottery, woven cloth supplanted hide preparation, and manufactured tools reduced the need for traditional skills. While some tasks became easier, the cultural knowledge embedded in handmade items was lost. It was like receiving a modern convenience but forgetting the skills and traditions that once defined you. Land ownership concepts also disrupted traditional life. Native peoples viewed land as communal, but Europeans imposed private property, claiming and enclosing ancestral lands. This disrupted hunting grounds, agricultural fields, and foraging areas that women had carefully managed for generations, limiting their ability to provide for families and uphold traditional roles. Even spiritual life was targeted. Christian missionaries sought to convert native peoples, often condemning traditional practices and undermining female spiritual leaders and healers. The spiritual authority of women, central in many indigenous systems, was challenged or violently suppressed. As European settlements grew, native women, once central to society, faced physical threats and systematic dismantling of their social, economic, and spiritual foundations. This marked the beginning of a long struggle for survival, both physical and cultural. Following initial contact, an invisible enemy emerged, disease, far deadlier than any army. Illnesses like smallpox, measles, influenza, and bubonic plague decimated families and communities, altering daily life irreversibly. You weren't just facing cultural upheaval, you were facing a plague. Communities with no inherited immunity were devastated, sometimes losing 50%, 70%, or even 90% of their populations within decades. Entire villages disappeared, leaving death in their wake. For women, the impact was multifaceted. As caregivers and healers, they confronted these diseases directly, often powerless to protect loved ones. Children, spouses, elders, they all succumbed while women struggled to provide care and comfort. The emotional and physical toll was overwhelming. The demographic collapse shattered families, broke kinship networks, and erased critical knowledge, stories, ceremonial practices, and medicinal secrets, essentially the cultural memory preserved by women. This loss also created population imbalances. The deaths of reproductive age women reduced birth rates, and the loss of children diminished future generations. Survivors faced cycles of grief and rebuilding with fewer resources and less experience, making every healthy child a precious symbol of hope. Psychologically, the trauma was immense. Survivors bore the weight of mass death, often feeling isolated and spiritually challenged as their traditional practices failed against the new threats. Despite this, Native women continued to adapt and resist. They cared for the sick, buried the dead, preserved traditions, and worked tirelessly to rebuild families and communities from the devastation. Their resilience in the face of relentless biological warfare stands as a powerful testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit. Yet, the scars of these epidemics, both physical and cultural, were deep, shaping generations to come. As disease swept through communities, another equally insidious force emerged: forced assimilation. This was not open warfare but a calculated attack on Native American identity, aimed particularly at women and children, with the goal of erasing indigenous cultures and replacing them with European American norms. This process went beyond colonization. It was an attempt at erasure. Traditions were condemned, and the very essence of Native life was deemed uncivilized. Imagine a government decree asserting that your language, spiritual beliefs, clothing, and family structures were inferior and must be abandoned. This was the foundation of assimilation policies, primarily enforced through boarding schools and the imposition of Christian values. For Native American women, these policies attacked everything they represented as cultural educators, mothers, and spiritual leaders. The most notorious example of forced assimilation was the Indian boarding school system in the United States and Canada. From the late 19th century, hundreds of thousands of Native children were forcibly taken from their families, often by military force, and sent to distant schools. The chilling motto, "Kill the Indian, save the man," perfectly captured the genocidal intent behind these policies. Parents faced the terror of having their children removed, knowing that their language would be beaten out of them, their hair cut, and their cultural identity systematically stripped away. This separation shattered the sacred bonds between mother and child and between generations. Historians continue to study the profound psychological and cultural trauma inflicted by these institutions. At these schools, Native girls were often specifically trained for domestic labor, housemaids, laundresses, cooks, roles aligned with Victorian European ideals of womanhood, in stark contrast to their traditional roles as healers, agriculturalists, or clan mothers. Skills once honed for tanning hides or weaving baskets were replaced with scrubbing floors and ironing clothes. This was not mere vocational training, It was a deliberate effort to sever ties to cultural heritage and prepare girls for subservient roles in the dominant society, a finishing school designed to erase identity rather than refine it. The schools forbade native languages, punished spiritual practices, and imposed Christian teachings. Children were often given English names, further disconnecting them from their ancestral roots. For women, who traditionally transmitted language and culture within families, this was devastating. Children returning from boarding schools often spoke no native language, felt alienated from their families, and existed between two worlds, fully belonging to neither. This produced deep intergenerational trauma that continues to affect Native communities today. The imposition of Euro-American gender roles further diminished women's influence. As men were pressured into farming, wage labor, and dealing with external authorities, women's traditional economic contributions were devalued. Policies like the Dawes Act, which divided communal lands into individual allotments, often granted land to male heads of households, further eroding women's economic power and status. Yet, Native American women demonstrated extraordinary resilience. Many resisted assimilation in both subtle and overt ways, teaching their children language in secret, performing ceremonies discreetly, and safeguarding spiritual practices. They became quiet keepers of cultural knowledge, preserving what they could amid immense suppression. Nevertheless, the scars of this era ran deep, leaving a legacy of loss and an ongoing struggle for cultural revitalization. As forced assimilation persisted, another defining challenge emerged: reservation life. This was not merely a relocation. It was a profound, often brutal confinement that cut ties to ancestral lands, disrupted traditional economies, and imposed oppressive realities on every aspect of life. Native people were restricted to small, often infertile parcels of land, far from hunting grounds, agricultural lands, and sacred sites. For women, this was an immediate blow to their ability to sustain families. Knowledge passed down through generations, how to forage, manage resources, and find water, became largely irrelevant in confined, depleted reservations. Traditional economic roles were disrupted. Women who had been primary agriculturalists, gatherers, or processors of game often became dependent on inadequate government rations. Attempts to impose unfamiliar farming techniques or force nomadic tribes into sedentary agriculture frequently failed due to unsuitable land. This loss of economic autonomy undermined women's traditional status as providers and contributors to the tribal economy. Communal living structures, like longhouses or extended family dwellings, were replaced with smaller individual houses reflecting European norms. This dismantled kinship networks and collective support systems critical for child rearing and daily labor, increasing isolation and hardship. Even small changes, such as replacing open-fire cooking with inefficient stoves, disrupted diet, health, and traditional practices. Reservation life also introduced new forms of social control. Government-appointed agents held significant power, regulating daily activities and religious practices. Women who once held leadership and autonomy in their communities found their roles ignored or suppressed, further weakening their influence. The psychological impact of confinement and dependency was severe. Generations grew up without access to ancestral lands, traditional resources, or cultural practices, leading to poverty, health crises, and deep despair. Despite these challenges, Native American women showed remarkable resilience. They preserved language through whispers, taught traditional crafts in secret, and maintained spiritual practices even at personal risk. Many adapted by generating income through crafts or beadwork while continuing to provide for their families. Their spirit remained unbroken, even as their world was profoundly transformed. Amid the oppressive confines of reservation life and ongoing assimilation, Native American women faced a new complex challenge: education and resistance. This wasn't the immersive, ancestral learning of their forebears. Instead, it was a Western-imposed system designed both to erase Native culture and provide tools to navigate the dominant society. It created a paradox. Mastering the ways of your oppressors might be essential for survival, yet it threatened to sever the deepest cultural ties. Imagine being told that your ancestral knowledge, passed down through generations, was primitive, and that true enlightenment existed only in the white man's schools. This belief underpinned the creation of boarding and day schools on reservations. For many Native women, education became a battleground for cultural identity. On one side, these schools aimed to civilize them, teaching English, vocational skills considered suitable for women, like domestic work and Christian values. Reading and writing, though seemingly irrelevant to traditional life, became powerful tools for future generations. The experience was often harsh. Children faced strict discipline, physical and emotional abuse, and systematic suppression of their languages and customs. Girls were trained for subservient roles, contrasting sharply with the leadership positions they held in traditional societies. Yet even in these oppressive conditions, quiet forms of resistance emerged. Students secretly spoke their languages, shared stories, and supported one another in maintaining cultural knowledge. These subtle acts, often led by young women, were a powerful assertion of identity against overwhelming pressure. Historians continue to debate how effective these schools were in achieving assimilation, highlighting the resilience of Native cultures. Interestingly, many Native students, particularly women, later turned the skills they learned, literacy, organizational abilities, and understanding of the legal system, into tools for advocacy. They learned to navigate bureaucracies that confined their communities, transforming instruments of oppression into mechanisms of resistance. It was like decoding the rules of captivity to craft an escape plan. Outside formal schools, women faced different educational challenges. Traditional learning through observation and participation was disrupted as communal life fragmented. Nevertheless, many women became informal teachers, passing on language, stories, and cultural knowledge to children and grandchildren, often secretly. They understood that cultural survival depended on these transmissions, even if formal education sought to suppress them. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Native women began engaging with external education strategically. Some pursued higher education, becoming teachers, nurses, lawyers, and activists. This was not capitulation but a deliberate choice to acquire knowledge and credentials to defend their communities on the dominant society's terms. By pursuing intellectual and professional growth, they broke barriers and challenged stereotypes. Thus, while forced education brought suffering and cultural loss, it also created unexpected opportunities. Native women found ways to resist, adapt, and harness new knowledge, turning themselves from targets of assimilation into agents of change. They laid the groundwork for future generations to reclaim heritage and demand justice. From the pressures of reservation life and enforced schooling, a powerful new force arose among Native women: activism and advocacy. This movement went beyond personal survival. It aimed at collective liberation, reclaiming sovereignty, cultural dignity, and justice. Native women drew on their traditional roles as caregivers, cultural stewards, and community leaders to step into advocacy. They understood that the well-being of families and tribes depended on systemic change. Early activism was often grassroots. Women organized to address immediate reservation needs: food, healthcare, and housing. Benevolent societies and self-help groups pooled resources and knowledge, demonstrating the communal spirit rooted in traditional ways. Though historians debate the tipping point for more organized activism, these decades of quiet resistance set the stage. By the 20th century, Native women increasingly took national roles. Figures like Zitkalasa, a Yankton, Dakota woman, became prominent advocates for Native rights. Writing against boarding school injustices and promoting self-determination, she skillfully navigated both Native and non-Native worlds, using her education to challenge the very system that had educated her. The mid-20th century brought more organized movements, like the American Indian Movement, AIM. While AIM often drew attention for confrontational tactics, Native women played critical roles behind the scenes and on the front lines. They participated in events like the occupation of Alcatraz, 1969, and Wounded Knee, 1973, contributing spiritual strength, organization, and unwavering commitment. Women managed logistics, distributed food, cared for children, and ensured the daily survival of protesters, continuing their traditional role as providers even in activism. Beyond protest, Native women became advocates for specific causes, returning ancestral lands, protecting sacred sites, fighting environmental threats, securing voting rights, improving education, and addressing poverty and health disparities. Their advocacy was holistic, recognizing the interconnectedness of these issues for community well-being. Today, Native women remain leaders in social justice. They fight for missing and murdered Indigenous women, MAW, advocate for tribal sovereignty, and champion cultural revitalization. Their voices draw strength from generations of resilience and a deep commitment to heritage. From silent endurance, Native women became a formidable force for change. They transformed personal struggles into collective movements, proving that advocacy springs from community ties and unwavering belief in justice. Their activism continues to shape the fight for Native rights and cultural recognition. Alongside these efforts, another battle persisted: preserving culture. This was not about relics of the past but protecting the soul of their people, languages, ceremonies, stories, and knowledge threatened by deliberate suppression. Native women were not just survivors, they were guardians. You were a living archive, tirelessly working to ensure that the threads of your heritage, however fragile, would not break. Imagine watching your language, the very vessel of your worldview, erode under forced English-only policies, or witnessing sacred ceremonies, practiced for centuries, being banned or vilified. This was reality for many Native communities. For women, who traditionally played central roles in cultural transmission, the responsibility and honor of preservation fell heavily on their shoulders. They knew that without language, ceremonies, and stories, their culture was at risk of vanishing. One of the most profound acts of cultural preservation was the effort to keep languages alive. Despite severe punishments in boarding schools and societal pressure to speak English, mothers and grandmothers quietly spoke their native tongues at home, teaching children words, phrases, lullabies, blessings, and conversational patterns. Even if done in secret, this ensured the rhythm and spirit of the language endured. It was a quiet act of resistance, a whisper against the roar of assimilation. Historians may debate the best strategies for language revitalization, but the dedication of these women is unmistakable. Beyond language, women were pivotal in maintaining traditional ceremonies and spiritual practices. When public rituals were banned, they found ways to continue them in private, passing down songs, dances, and intricate details from memory. They adapted, sometimes subtly modifying practices to avoid detection, but always preserved the core of their spiritual beliefs. These ceremonies were more than rituals; they were lifelines connecting communities to ancestors, lands, and the spiritual world. A notable detail: even seemingly simple craftwork, such as weaving patterns or bead designs, sometimes encoded spiritual narratives or tribal histories. This allowed cultural knowledge to persist quietly under the watch of colonial authorities. Women also preserved practical knowledge, from medicinal plant uses to ecological practices, from intricate crafts to storytelling traditions. They taught younger generations how to prepare traditional foods, process hides, weave baskets, and create regalia. This hands-on education acted as a living library of cultural expertise. Storytelling became a powerful preservation tool. Grandmothers gathered children by firesides or during daily chores to recount myths, historical narratives, and moral lessons. These stories carried history, wisdom, and humor, keeping the collective memory of the tribe alive, like an epic poem recited lovingly every night. Even today, Native American women lead cultural revitalization efforts. They run language immersion programs, establish cultural centers, organize arts workshops, and reclaim sacred sites. Through books, documentaries, and digital media, they share traditions widely, ensuring their cultures not only survive but thrive. Across generations, Native American women stood as steadfast guardians of heritage. Their quiet persistence and tireless dedication kept the flame of their culture alive. Their legacy is one of enduring spirit and deep commitment to identity. As they preserved culture, women also faced dramatic economic shifts. Colonization disrupted traditional subsistence economies based on hunting, gathering, and agriculture, forcing women to adapt to new, often challenging forms of labor. Their work now had to navigate a world where money, not just resources, determined survival. Fields, game processing, and craft production, once central to daily life, were devalued or constrained by reservations and a cash economy. Wage labor reshaped daily life. Many women sought work outside traditional roles, often under exploitative conditions, simply to support their families. Domestic work, housekeeping, laundry, childcare, became common. It was arduous, poorly paid, and frequently required time away from family. Yet some women leveraged these roles to learn about dominant society, gaining insights or subtly influencing decisions through their proximity to powerful households. Craft production for sale also became an economic strategy. Pottery, baskets, beadwork, and textiles, once used within tribal life or for ceremonies, were now marketed to tourists. While this provided income and preserved skills, it sometimes required altering designs for non-native tastes, a delicate negotiation between survival and cultural integrity. In some regions, women worked in agricultural wage labor, seasonal harvests, or farms owned by non-natives. This work was often grueling and poorly compensated, yet it provided necessary cash for essentials beyond government rations. Economic shifts varied by tribe. In areas dominated by fishing, logging, or ranching, women contributed indirectly through domestic labor, food preparation, and community organization. They managed finances, stretched limited resources, and adapted family life to new realities, demonstrating resourcefulness and resilience. These adaptations reveal Native American women's remarkable agency. They were not passive victims but active navigators of a transformed economic landscape, seeking opportunities to support their families and communities despite immense pressure. Alongside economic changes, gender roles were profoundly affected. Pre-colonial societies often had balanced divisions of labor and influence. Women's work in agriculture, crafts, and domestic life was valued alongside men's hunting and warfare. Colonization disrupted this balance, imposing hierarchical, patriarchal norms that relegated women to subservient domestic roles. Women were not only adapting their work, they were renegotiating their place in a society reshaped by external forces. External pressures systematically undermined the traditional authority and respect afforded to Native women. Historians continue to debate exactly how these pressures interacted with existing gender dynamics in different tribes, recognizing the complexity of these changes. For example, the introduction of a cash economy often favored male labor in industries like logging, mining, or commercial farming, giving men direct access to wages. This frequently devalued women's traditional labor in subsistence farming or crafting for communal use, which was not recognized in monetary terms. This economic shift sometimes altered household power dynamics, as men became primary earners and, in the eyes of colonizers, heads of households. It's akin to being told that the careful work of tending a complex garden is worth less than a factory job. Despite these pressures, Native women adapted and resisted imposed gender norms. They took on new economic roles such as selling crafts or domestic work, continuing to contribute financially and supporting their families. In many cases, women became the backbone of households, sustaining families even as traditional male roles were disrupted by reservation life and the loss of customary activities. Interestingly, some women became adept at navigating the bureaucracies of Indian agencies, acting as intermediaries between their communities and external authorities, effectively exercising political influence through administrative skill. While external forces sought to reduce women's political and spiritual roles, many women retained significant influence, especially elder women and clan mothers. They preserved traditional practices privately, guided family decisions, and often served as moral leaders. The shift largely reflected how outsiders perceived Native leadership rather than an internal loss of respect for women's inherent authority. Gender roles varied across tribes. Some traditionally recognized more than two genders or roles for individuals embodying both masculine and feminine spirits, often referred to as two-spirit individuals. European-imposed binaries and prejudice against non-conforming genders added layers of suppression, complicating indigenous understandings of gender and sexuality. The evolution of gender roles for Native women during and after colonization was complex and often painful. It involved both imposed hierarchies and quiet resistance to preserve traditional values. Despite these challenges, Native women demonstrated remarkable resilience, remaining deeply committed to their families and cultures, proving that their strength could not easily be confined by external forces. Beyond their communities, Native women played crucial, often overlooked roles in shaping intertribal relations. Their work went beyond avoiding conflict, encompassing intricate diplomacy, trade, and kinship networks that ensured the stability and prosperity of diverse nations. Membership in a tribe was also participation in a broader web of relationships spanning vast distances. Treaties were not only formal agreements, they were embedded in family ties and economic exchanges often facilitated by women. While male leaders engaged in overt diplomacy or warfare, women maintained peace, encouraged trade, and solidified alliances through marriage. Strategic marriages between tribes created kinship networks that enforced mutual support and non-aggression, establishing a more personal and enduring form of diplomacy than signed documents alone. Women were central to intertribal trade networks as producers of baskets, pottery, textiles, processed hides, and agricultural surplus. Their expertise in crafts and food preparation made them indispensable to long-distance exchange. Trade routes were not just commerce channels but also pathways for sharing knowledge, stories, and cultural practices. Even though historians debate the scale of these networks, their cultural significance is undeniable. Through marriage or adoption, women brought languages, stories, songs, and skills to new tribes, facilitating cultural diffusion. This exchange enriched agricultural, medicinal, artistic, and spiritual practices across indigenous societies. Certain pottery or beadwork patterns traceable across tribes hint at artistic exchanges largely facilitated by women. In times of conflict, women often acted as mediators and peacemakers. Their roles as mothers and nurturers gave them moral authority, allowing them to intervene in raids, advocate for the adoption of captives instead of execution, or call for truces. Laments for the fallen could also pressure male leaders to reconsider the costs of warfare. Kinship, central to Native societies, often extended beyond individual tribes. Women, as anchors of family and clan structures, forged and maintained these wider bonds, ensuring intertribal relations were grounded in respect and obligation. History frequently highlights male leaders, but it was women who quietly wove the threads of diplomacy, trade, and kinship that sustained peace and cooperation, keeping the tapestry of indigenous North America vibrant and interconnected. Another profound aspect of Native women's lives was their connection to sacred spaces and the land itself. The land was not merely a residence or resource, it was a living entity, a spiritual mother, and the embodiment of identity, history, and ancestry. Every mountain, river, and grove held stories. Specific springs were healing sites, and certain formations held spiritual power. Women, as primary gatherers, agriculturalists, and resource caretakers, maintained an intimate relationship with the environment, understanding that the land's health directly affected the community. This was not mere stewardship but kinship, a concept often alien to European colonizers. Sacred sites, whether natural or historically significant, often held particular importance for women. These lands were often used for vision quests, women's fertility and childbirth ceremonies, or gathering specific medicinal plants that only grew in sacred areas. Walking these lands was itself a form of prayer, a continuous recognition of ancestors and the spiritual forces that filled the environment. It was as if the entire world was an ancient cathedral, and each step was a pilgrimage. The loss of ancestral lands through colonization and forced relocation to reservations was more than a physical displacement, it was a profound spiritual trauma. Being cut off from these sacred spaces meant losing access to vital spiritual connections, ancestral graves, and the stories embedded in the landscape. This cultural and spiritual dispossession deeply affected women, who had long been the custodians of these land-based traditions. Even amid such loss, Native American women maintained their bond with the land. On reservations, they found new sacred places and adapted spiritual practices to their changed environments. They taught their children to respect the earth, to listen to its whispers, and to remember the stories of their homelands. Their spiritual resilience allowed them to maintain connection despite physical separation. A notable practice was carrying small pouches of earth from ancestral lands, a tangible link to heritage that transcended distance. Today, Native American women are leading land-back movements and environmental justice efforts. They protect sacred sites from desecration, fight against polluting industries, and work to reclaim stewardship of natural resources. Their advocacy is rooted in a profound connection to the land, recognizing that protecting the earth safeguards their people, culture, and future. Their voices convey not only legal claims but also the spiritual and cultural imperative to defend the planet. For Native American women, the land was more than soil. It was the source of life, spirit, and identity. Their unwavering connection, both physical and remembered, stands as a testament to their enduring spirit and a guiding force for future generations. Through hardship and resilience, one trait shines above all: extraordinary strength. Despite colonization, disease, forced assimilation, and the destruction of traditional life, Native American women preserved their heritage and sense of identity. They were not only resilient, they were indomitable, a living example of human perseverance. Consider losing nearly everything: land, language, traditional roles, spiritual practices, and countless loved ones. Yet, Native women held onto the fragments, reconstructing them with unwavering determination. Their strength was spiritual, emotional, and cultural, rooted in love for family and community. This is not merely history, it is a living testament to human perseverance. Their resilience appeared in countless ways: a grandmother whispering stories in a forbidden language, a woman preserving traditional crafts when modern goods were available, or fierce protection of family amid poverty and discrimination. These everyday acts, often invisible to mainstream society, were crucial to cultural survival. Historians still struggle to fully document the breadth of resistance by Native women, highlighting the subtle yet pervasive nature of their enduring spirit. Their role as cultural bearers exemplifies this continuity. Despite efforts to erase languages and traditions through boarding schools, women transmitted knowledge, values, and practices across generations. Acting as the primary educators within families, they ensured that their people's worldview, history, and spiritual beliefs were not lost. This informal, intergenerational transfer of knowledge became the cornerstone of cultural survival, like preserving a priceless library by hand-copying every book. Spiritual resilience also played a central role. Even when ceremonies were outlawed or forced underground, women maintained sacred connections, adapting practices and finding new ways to honor the earth and ancestors. Some even integrated elements of Christianity, not as conversion, but to interpret new ideas through an indigenous perspective. This ability to adapt ensured that core beliefs remained alive, providing guidance and a sense of identity amid disruption. Today, Native women continue to lead cultural revitalization. They spearhead language immersion programs, cultural heritage centers, and initiatives to reclaim sacred lands. They advocate for environmental justice, address the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women, MMIW, and champion tribal sovereignty. This leadership reflects the strength and wisdom passed down through generations. Reflecting on Native American women's journey reveals not just survival, but a narrative of enduring spirit. Their ability to adapt, resist, preserve, and lead demonstrates resilience and serves as a beacon of hope for anyone striving to maintain identity and dignity. Their legacy is living, shaping the present and inspiring the future. Even today, Native women face challenges rooted in historical injustices. This is an ongoing struggle against systemic inequalities, cultural appropriation, and disproportionate violence and poverty. It is not merely history, it is a current reality. Imagine living in a society where your people's history is overlooked or misrepresented, where stereotypes persist, and access to essential services is limited. For Native women, these are daily realities. Long-term effects of forced removal, broken treaties, cultural suppression, and economic exploitation have created deep socioeconomic disparities. These are not mere disadvantages, they are the systemic consequences of centuries of oppression. One urgent issue is the crisis of missing and murdered indigenous women. Native women are killed at rates 10 times higher than the national average, with many cases ignored or underinvestigated. Contributing factors include jurisdictional gaps, systemic racism, and societal indifference. This reality generates constant fear, knowing sisters, daughters, and friends are disappearing while justice remains elusive. This represents a profound violation of human rights. Historians and activists widely recognize that the roots of this violence lie in the dehumanization of indigenous women during colonization. Poverty remains a pervasive challenge. Many reservations face limited economic opportunities, resulting in high unemployment and reliance on often inadequate federal funding. Native women are disproportionately affected, as they frequently carry the primary responsibility of supporting their families. Insufficient infrastructure, from clean water to reliable internet, exacerbates these economic hardships, creating barriers to education and independence. It's like being asked to run a marathon while carrying ankle weights and denied water breaks. Access to quality healthcare is another significant barrier. Native communities experience higher rates of chronic illnesses, lower life expectancy, and limited access to medical facilities and trained personnel, particularly for women's health. Historical trauma from forced sterilizations and medical experimentation also fosters deep mistrust of mainstream healthcare systems. Yet, despite these challenges, many Native communities are blending traditional healing practices with modern medicine, pursuing holistic solutions that honor their heritage. Native American women also continue to fight cultural appropriation and misrepresentation. Their spiritual practices are often commercialized, their images stereotyped in media, and their voices marginalized in national discussions. This ongoing struggle for accurate representation is exhausting but essential for reclaiming their narratives and asserting cultural integrity. Even amid these obstacles, Native American women persist. They lead movements, advocate for policy change, build support networks, and rebuild communities with remarkable determination. Their efforts demonstrate an unyielding spirit that refuses to be silenced or erased. From these challenges, a vibrant movement is emerging, centered on cultural revitalization and a thriving future. This movement is about more than survival. It's about reclaiming, rebuilding, and shaping a future where cultures flourish, voices are heard, and sovereignty is recognized. Imagine communities where children learn ancestral languages in immersion schools, where traditional ceremonies are openly practiced, and where indigenous art and philosophy are celebrated as vital contributions to global culture. This vision drives countless Native American women today, as they lead efforts to restore practices suppressed for centuries. This is not mere nostalgia. It is an act of profound self-determination and healing, addressing the wounds of forced assimilation. Scholars now document these revitalization efforts, acknowledging their critical importance. One inspiring example is the language revitalization movement. Women, often elders who secretly preserved their native tongues, are now leading the teaching of these languages to younger generations. They run classes, create teaching materials, and develop immersive environments for children to grow fluent in their heritage. Language is the heartbeat of culture, carrying worldviews, humor, and unique perspectives, like rediscovering lost musical scores and bringing them back to life, note by note. Beyond language, Native American women are reclaiming traditional ecological knowledge. They restore ancestral food systems, revive sustainable farming, and reintroduce land management practices that support biodiversity and ecological health. These efforts honor sacred relationships with plants and animals, viewing them as relatives and teachers. This holistic approach challenges mainstream industrial models and offers crucial lessons for planetary sustainability. Some women even reintroduce nearly lost seed varieties, ensuring food sovereignty and cultural continuity. In the arts, Native American women innovate while honoring tradition. They create contemporary works rooted in ancient forms, using traditional techniques to express modern experiences and present their work nationally and internationally. This artistic renaissance is a powerful form of cultural expression and economic empowerment, challenging stereotypes and highlighting enduring indigenous creativity. Their designs appear in fashion, their stories on screen, and their voices in literature, asserting their presence across diverse spheres. Additionally, Native American women lead in policy and governance. They run for office at tribal, state, and national levels, bringing indigenous perspectives to decision-making. They work as lawyers, activists, and organizers advocating for tribal sovereignty, water rights, land protection, and social justice. Their leadership transforms systems from within while confronting injustices from outside, demonstrating adaptability rooted in ancient wisdom. The future for Native American women is about action, not passive hope. It's about healing historical trauma through cultural resurgence, empowering younger generations, and ensuring their unique voices are recognized globally. Their vision embodies strength, resilience, and a thriving future for all indigenous peoples. As we conclude this journey into the extraordinary lives of Native American women, this is more than an ending. It's an invitation to reflect on their enduring legacies. You've glimpsed their joys, struggles, and triumphs. Consider the strength required, generation after generation, to nurture life, sustain culture, and resist relentless pressures. These women were not mythical, they were real individuals with dreams, fears, and an unwavering connection to their communities. They remind us that true strength often lies not in visible dominance, but in quiet resilience, consistent dedication, and the enduring act of preserving culture against all odds. Their lives challenge the narrow definitions of power and influence that commonly shape historical accounts, offering instead a richer, more interconnected view of human societies. Consider the contrast between their world and ours, the physical demands of daily life, the close connection to the land and its cycles, the dependence on communal support, and the profound spiritual awareness of one's place in the universe. These are aspects often lost in modern life. Yet perhaps we feel a subtle longing for that deeper connection. Their story goes beyond actions. It reflects what they embodied: harmony with nature, unwavering commitment to family and community, and a strong sense of self-determination. Remember the clan mothers who guided with wisdom and the respect of their lineage rather than force. Recall the healers who found remedies in plants and solace in ceremony. Consider the artists weaving stories into every basket and bead, and the activists who rose, against immense challenges, to demand justice and reclaim their heritage. Their experiences demonstrate that gender roles are not fixed, societies can flourish under diverse leadership, and resilience can emerge even in the harshest conditions. Their legacy is alive, not only in history books, but in vibrant cultures that continue today, in languages being revived, in new art being created, and in the powerful voices of contemporary Native American women. This legacy calls us to listen carefully, learn deeply, and question our own assumptions about history, power, and identity. Their strength serves as a guide for all who wish to honor heritage and work toward a more just world. As you drift into sleep, let the whispers of their journey remain with you. Feel the power of their hands, the wisdom in their eyes, and the enduring spirit that carried them through centuries. May their story offer not only knowledge but a profound sense of connection to a fundamental human truth. Sweet dreams.